So what about the future and the past? As the new book shows, attempts to divine the future, a favorite pastime at the start of a new decade, often prove pitiful. First, let us briefly look back on the 00s or the double O's, a decade that in one respect ends exactly as it began, without a consensus on what we should call it. Plenty of names have been suggested over the years. The aughts, the noughts, the naughties, the zips, the preteens, the O's and the OOs are among the more familiar. You've probably heard them all, but none has caught on. And we've had another naming problem throughout the decade. Most people refer to 2009 as 2009, so consistency would seem to require that it be called 2009, just as 1909 is known as 1909, and 1809 is 1809. That usage is centuries old. Perhaps it will make a comeback in the tens. 2011 falls off the tongue far more lightly than does 2011. So then, why did it not call 2009 2009? So 2010 can also be called 2010. It does have a meaning. Then, too, many people have acted as if this opening decade defines the 21st century. 5 years ago, writing for Slate, Timothy Noah described this tendency as pompous and stupid. Nothing since then undermines his assessment. Imagine the disdain that would now be directed at someone who announced with absolute confidence in 1909 that he had the 20th century figured out. Pretty much all defining events of that century, 2 world wars, the Holocaust, the collapse of European colonialism in Asia and Africa, the rise and fall of the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, the advent of commercial air travel, television, space exploration, and computers, to name a few, would not have begun to pierce his imagination. Yet how many times over the last 10 years have you heard someone describe this or that as a challenge of the 21st century, with challenge often modified by an adjective like transcendent, core, or greatest? A short list called from newspaper articles includes Islamic terrorism, China's ascendance, the search for gravity waves, advances in the life sciences, quantum theory, and concepts like remaking the post-war landscape and harmonizing the human and natural worlds. Who knows if any of these will be seen as a challenge, let alone the century's transcendent challenge in 10 or 20 years. But fascination with what comes next is not likely to end, if only because most people expect to spend time in the future. I think we all have a profound psychological need to impose a kind of order on our world, and we need to know what's going on, said Paul Milo, a freelance writer. In making predictions, even the bad predictions, at least we're telling ourselves that we can see around the bend and we can prepare. Just beware of those man-made forecasts, Mr. Milo says. He wrote the book mentioned earlier. It is called Your Flying Car Awaits, Robot Butlers, Lunar Vacations, and Other Dead Wrong Predictions of the 20th Century. And as the title says, it is a guide to some major oops committed in many instances by eminent thinkers. Even the goofy predictions were made by people who, for one thing, were very brilliant, and who, for another, had some good calls. So, the implied purpose of the book, in a fun way, is to remind people that you never know exactly, and you have to proceed through life that way. If you wish, you can take it from Abraham Lincoln, who is credited by some with having this to say about what lies ahead. The best thing about the future is that it comes only one day at a time, which goes back to that verse in the Holy Bible. No man knows the exact hour, the day, or the minute. Well, because it doesn't all happen. The end times, which is actually the end of times as we know it, or on to the next act. In other words, the world is not ending. It's always about a new beginning. That's what comes next. And it's happening right now. The world is undergoing a transition, or an end of one era and the beginning of another era. That's why it's called the end times. It's really also the transition days, or the end of times as we know it. Huge changes must happen. They must come. The world as we know it must change. And yes, change is happening daily all around the world. And these are more signs of the transition days. And there are many different kinds of signs happening all over the world, day by day.